But it is a conjecture, and I think a very valid one, that this whole business of play acting, pretending to be what you're not, began with the caveman. When humans had no language, their two needs, food and shelter, both of which were served by hunting. When the hunt had to be, when you had to go on a hunt, it is assumed that the hunt had to be rehearsed, a plan had to be made. So, one person became the deer, one person became the hunter, another one became the cloud, another one became the river, and so on, and the hunt was enacted. This is pure conjecture, but it sounds very valid to me. And then, so the hunt was enacted. In other words, it began with the need to communicate the same point to everyone present, not to entertain. Gradually, the element of entertaining must have come in because there must have been some nubile lass who played the deer better than anyone else. Some ferocious person who played the tiger better than anyone else. So they were cast as the deer and the tiger all the time. The beginning of typecasting. Then, I suppose, people talk of what they've seen. So somebody was saying, hey, that chap, he does the elephant extremely well. And so that guy became famous as the elephant. And then he probably one day said, look, if you want me to play the elephant, you've got to give me 20 pebbles more. I need an extra helping of food, of meat this time. He laid down his conditions. The beginning of the star system. And that is in fact how theatre began. And as I said before, it's worth repeating, it began not with the need to entertain. It began with the need to convey something clearly and precisely. The next step in the evolution, which is on record, is and the reason why the religious associations with theatre continue to persist is because it was practiced in the temples. In ancient India, in ancient Greece, in ancient China, in ancient Japan. There were theatres inside the temples. The priests would enact particularly difficult passages of scripture for the benefit of the congregation. If it was Latin or something, or whatever language. And so you still see the religious associations in theatre, particularly in Maharashtra and in the south, where you always have a lamp that's lit, you always have an illumination, you always have a garland of flowers, and actors pay obeisance to the stage the way they do in a shrine. The trouble with that is, a lot of actors feel that paying obeisance to the stage is enough. That if they touch their forehead to the stage, their job is done. That's why I have reservations about all this. Our teacher Al-Qazi used to say that I don't want to see anybody doing this, because this does not display your respect for the stage. Your respect for the stage will show in the number of drops of sweat that fall on the stage. So I don't want to see anybody doing this on the stage. And you'll also notice that people who do this to the stage only do it when someone is watching. They never do it 4 o'clock in the morning before anybody's arrived. If it means so much to you, do it at that time. Why do you wait for people to assemble and then see your devotion? Anyway, when I'm digressing, the point I'm trying to make is that we all are aware of, from the beginnings of the caveman and the priests in the theatres, where the work of acting has reached now. We have somehow lost sight of its real purpose Actors themselves have lost sight of its real purpose. Ask an actor, when you act, what do you do? Most actors won't be able to answer that question. Ask a carpenter what he does. When he builds a table, he'll be able to give you a precise answer. Ask a potter. Ask any kind of artisan. But actors are unable to break down their work into its component parts and talk about it. Very few of them are articulate about their work. They immediately start talking of God-given talent and natural ability and all these sort of things, which are only words in my opinion. The purpose of an actor is that of a messenger. The most inspiring title for an actor's autobiography I've ever come across is Dr. Sriram Lagu's autobiography in Marathi, which is called Gaman. Gaman means a carrier of goods. It's the most unpretentious, the most succinct title for an actor's life that I've ever heard. Because it's an actor's job to deliver with clarity, with completeness and with purity what the writer has written and what the director intends. But actors themselves consider their job to be a means of showing off. And that is why perhaps the quality of acting in our country is as abysmal as it is, particularly in the movies. And it's astonishing that a country with a tradition of more than 1,000 years of theatre, a country with a tradition of performing in the classical arts, which is probably older than anywhere else in the world, we are so starved of artistic stimulation today, where aping something that the West has done is just good enough for us. Our film industry has, of course, completely fallen prey to that, and I don't think it can ever emerge from that morass, because it's a very profitable morass. So nothing is ever going to happen. The hope that there is in the theatre. And what's encouraging to me, and this is connected with what I'm saying, what's encouraging to me to see today in the theatre is so many youngsters writing plays about issues which concern them. They're not sitting in an air-conditioned apartment and writing about the starving villagers in Bihar. They're not writing about borrowed pains, as was the case earlier. Also, they're all using living language in their plays. When I was a student in drama school, and I encountered Indian drama for the first time, because I studied in English. I was in English medium school, then I did a degree in literature. I was under the impression that the only great writing ever that's been done is in English. The only great poets are English poets, the only great playwrights are Bernard Shaw and William Shakespeare. It took me a long time to get rid of that preconception and to recognize the worth of our own writing. So what I see in the young people of today who are doing theatre is that they are writing about stuff which affects them directly, and that's a wonderful thing. They're not writing fairy tales, they're not writing on borrowed pains. And that's encouraging, and it's good because it is serving precisely the purpose that theatre is meant to serve. To edify and educate. Again, before lest what I'm saying sounds a little too pedantic. What I mean by educate means to raise a question really. It doesn't mean necessarily to lecture. The purpose of art is to raise questions, not to provide the answers. And that is what theatre can do. It is, unlike cinema, a medium which can stimulate your mind while you're in the process of watching it. There was a survey which showed that while watching television, is about as alert as it is when you're asleep. Which is why we can watch television for 8 hours non-stop. Any of us. But, and cinema does the same thing, I dare say. Theatre does not. Theatre needs you to be awake and alert and with your sense of judgment unimpaired. It's also a great mistake to imagine, and I'm afraid a lot of people imagine it because I'm constantly asked this question, why don't we have a Broadway? Why don't we have a theatre culture? Well, thank God we don't have a Broadway. We've got Hindi movies. We don't need Broadway. As for the theatre culture is concerned, it's a big mystery. What happened to theatre in our country? Why did it wither away in certain languages? The languages in which it did survive and still stays vibrant, like Marathi, are perhaps, I'm hard put, apart from Marathi and Manipuri perhaps, to think of another state in which original theatre is constantly being created. But the craft of playwriting itself seems to have withered away. The craft of screenwriting never took wing. The reason for that, it's a little bit disconnected from what I'm going to say, but it may be of interest, that in the silent cinema in India, there were European ladies, there were Parsi gentlemen, always in the leads. There were Saraswat Maharashtrians who were fair-skinned, blue-eyed, and could pass off as European. The movies that were made were either mythologicals, or fairy tales, or bad copies of the Hollywood. You always see the hero with a felt hat, an overcoat, and a Ronald Coleman moustache, and a cigarette dangling from his lips. We were just aping what was happening there, or we were recreating the kind of plays that were prevalent in the early part of the 20th century. And the reason for that was when Indian cinema movies turned talkie, the Parsi gentlemen, the European ladies, the Maharashtrian, they had to go because they needed actors who could speak the language. The language, there was no artificial distinction between Hindi and Urdu that was created at the time of partition. I believe Hindi and Urdu are the same language with an artificial differentiation, but anyway, that's another point. They had to be replaced by actors who could speak. Where would they find those actors? In the theatre. Not just the actors, the writers, musicians, scenic designers, lyricists, dancers, choreographers, everybody from the theatre was sucked into the movies. Which is why the movies of that era look like nothing but staged plays. Because all those people brought that sensibility of theatre with them. What was that sensibility? The Abba Hashar Kashmiri plays which were rip-offs of Shakespeare, or which were borrowed from the Arabian Nights, Ali Baba or Sinbad or one of those kind of things. And all that came into the cinema. That form of theatre where everything was underlined in red, every emotional moment was hammered into the audience's mind, and the action of the play would stop every 15 minutes for a song, which had no connection whatever to the plot. We still don't seem to have outgrown this form. And what happened was, the playwrights had nothing more to write. They didn't know whether they were writing a play or a movie anymore. The screenwriters depended upon the existing plays. They still do. the amount that Hindi cinema borrows from Shakespeare is not funny. I often wonder what Hindi cinema would have been like if not for Shakespeare's source material. But that's probably what happened, and the whole business got stifled because theatre and cinema were joined at the hip. This didn't happen in Marathi for some reason. The filmmakers there were a tad more enlightened than the ones making movies in Hindi, I believe. Because the very first truly experimental movies, we call them, were made in the Marathi language by no less than Mr. Shantaram himself, who made films of extremely progressive subjects way back in the 30s and 40s. There was Zia Sarhadi, there was Khwaja Ahmed Abbas, people who are forgotten now. But they were the ones who really started it. Now, but I seem to be digressing. The point I'm trying to make is, when we come back to the issue of truth, the actor's truth depends 100% on the work he's in. An actor can bring no conviction to a part that is faultily written. He only has to submit. And if the part is well written, half his job is done for him. If the part is faultily written, there isn't a thing he can do except suffer. And then he has to do that. It's also a moot point as to what constitutes truth of behavior. Are our everyday reactions, the way we respond to people in life, are they truthful or are they conditioned responses? The fact that someone feels natural doing this, someone else feels natural doing that, someone else feels natural touching an elder's feet, someone feels more natural kissing an elder's hand, etc. These are not natural reflexes, these are things which we've been conditioned to do. And so therefore we are unable, like for example, when I'm asked in a movie or a play to touch an elder's feet, actually I do it, but it doesn't come naturally to me. The same way as doing this couldn't come naturally to a person who's not been doing it all his life. Or doing this would not come naturally. So, this was a big question that was raised by a great Polish director called Grotowski, who claimed that what we understand as truthful behavior is in fact not. We have to go deeper to understand it. Let's try and progress towards the origins of behavior. And that's a whole long story by itself. But if you think about it, there is a lot of substance in what he said. What he was talking of was reverting to the primal state, discovering primal sounds and so on. It's unattainable, but it has a lot of substance in what he said. There is a lot of substance in what he said. Because you often notice an actor who you've seen many times before, and you feel that he's doing the same thing that he always does. At other times, you feel, hey, I've not seen him do this before. Now those are the moments, I think, where he manages to shed his acting habits, which are about as strongly in control of you as our everyday habits. And that is when there is a burst of perhaps originality, and you are affected by that work. An actor whose voice surprises you has through dint of a great deal of labor, hit upon the primal sound, and it suddenly affects you in a way that a conditioned sound would not. Similarly with behavior, which is why when I help me to discover what I have within me. So that is what I try to do. So with the help of what all these people have given me, I've devised a kind of a system. It's been part of the search in my life, because acting has always meant more to me than anything else, except perhaps cricket. They meant the same, then acting took the upper hand. But I was always a very good liar when I was a child. I was a very convincing liar. I think children who are convincing liars become good actors. Because there's a book of acting called Lies Like Truth. You can only convince somebody when you're lying if you believe that you're telling the truth. It's what an actor has to do. If I'm playing a starving roadside dweller, I must believe I'm one. If I'm playing a lunatic king, I must believe I'm one. It isn't easy to believe in yourself as a fool, for example. And most actors don't enjoy doing that. They all want to be the good guy, the hero, the savior, the lone ranger who comes right into the rescue. Nobody imagines himself to be the idiot. But that's important as well. When I play a
person being very low, at least mine is not endure on TV. So that was one. Confession two is, I have a self-made rule, I was brought up in Choose team. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and I work with a corporation where we get, a lot of stars coming in from time to time. Never ever once have I gone to meet or hear a star. This is an exception. The first time when my daughter told me that you are coming, I said I'm going to be there. So thank you so much. I think it was worth every bit of it. Thank you so much, sir.
I really appreciate what you said, and when you're told that somebody does not like you, it doesn't feel good. But it's important to swallow that and to get beyond it and try to understand why that has happened. And it's not the first time I've been told this, and it's hurt each time. But I think I've managed to win over a lot of those people in the course of time. So someday I'll win over your daughter as well.
I'm sure, sir. And I have full confidence. One last request. You said, stars, being a star is a very insular and you feel very lonely. Can I, a common man, come up and hug you to bring some cheer to your...
You mentioned that an actor gets to explore many human emotions that normally perhaps would not be a part of your life. Isn't this at some level a scary proposition that you do get to explore things that you perhaps don't want to explore?
It's scary. It's not pleasant. It's not scary because, as somebody said, that the great joy of acting is that you can live so many imaginary lives without facing the real life consequences. That's a great blessing. To play an alcoholic, you don't have to become an alcoholic. To play a murderer, you don't have to murder somebody. It's a lot to do with your imagination. It's taking off in your own head, and that's always a stimulating thing. Though you're absolutely right when you say that it's a very perilous line that sometimes actors can put themselves on, where their sanity gets in danger. But that happens only, I think, to actors who take themselves too seriously. There's a famous story of a very celebrated actor still living, considered the greatest actor in the world, who was performing Hamlet on stage and got so involved in believing he was Hamlet, that he saw his own father's ghost on stage, not Hamlet's father's ghost, his own father's ghost. And his own father's ghost was signaling to him, so our man went off, he followed this ghost and walked right out of the theatre and disappeared somewhere while the audience was sitting there for the play to continue. Now this is undesirable, this is not, I think this kind of actor is in a very perilous situation. He can tip over any time because he really goes to extremes. I don't feel an actor needs to go to those extremes. I'm often asked, is there any part which has stayed with you, which has affected your life? Never. There have been parts where I felt my perception has improved, my perspective has gotten a little better. I understand a few things a little more than I did. Playing the Ghalib, for example, introduced me to my own language. Playing Gandhi on stage introduced me, made me understand my father's point of view and my son's points of view. So these kind of things happen, but I never have gotten so wrapped up in a part that I was unable to extricate myself from it. That's a very, very dangerous thing. Actors are always playing with their own sanity anyway, so you've got to be extra careful there. This term parallel cinema, experimental cinema, alternative cinema, whatever they like to call it now, it's crossover cinema or multiplex. These are all terms which are invented by the press and which are very damaging because it creates in the viewer's mind a barrier. ये तो art film है, ये तो बड़ी boring होगी. I've had people say that to me, आपकी फिल्में तो बड़ी boring होती हैं. ठीक है भाई, आपको लगती हैं, हर एक को नहीं लगता. So there are two kinds of movies in my opinion, good movies and bad movies. There can be very good movies in the popular genre and there can be very bad movies which claim to be art. So I completely agree with you.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, in your talk you put a lot of emphasis on originality in scripts. Originality in scripts. So, sir, in Vas Hindustani's certified copy, it's something I have read a lot, but he talks about an interesting question about
We're truly honored to have had the chance to host you at Malhar 2016, and I invite Malhar Chairperson Bandli to resonate with as a token of gratitude. Thank you, everyone. Everyone who wants to leave, please use the back door only.
Good afternoon to everyone once again. We hope we delivered what we promised to you in the first half of this carefully crafted confluence. To begin the second half, I take immense pleasure on behalf of two-time National Award-winning actress is famed for her spellbinding and phenomenal performances in Indian cinema. Starting her career at the age of 14 with Satyajit Ray's Popo Shomshad, she decades. Her performance in Gulzar's 1975 film, Mausam, received the coveted National Film Award for Best Actress. She won the in the cause of HIV/AIDS and is a board member of the PSP Trust. She gives general support for social value for a session with someone who has left an indelible mark on Indian cinema and someone who has been recognized over generations, Ms. Sharmila.
I worked in Central Board for Film Certification. I couldn't change the word censor board. So I'm no longer the chairperson of CBFC, but censor board. Even the office people used to answer the phone and say censor board. So I mean, it's like stuck in everybody's what to do. So I said, and thank you, Michelle, for coming to the airport despite your illness. I really, really appreciate that. You were very ill, but you came. Thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me here for this year's Malhar. And I believe it's been going on for 35 years. So it really begs the question, why did you wait for 35 years before you invited a woman keynote speaker? I asked Michelle, I said, did you have a predominantly female committee? She said, no, it was very equal and balanced. So thank you very much again. Yeah? And I believe this is the second largest youth festival, intercollegiate youth festival in Asia. And so I think it's in this lovely, big, overwhelming 148-year-old building. So it's all adding to that feeling of, I think, wonderful. And then because I called this session Reflection on a Rainy Day. So on cue, it's raining outside. Yeah. So I believe, I'm told, that your mascot is called Puddles. But going by Malhar's reputation, I have good reason to believe, since this year's theme is confluence, Puddles will certainly not be the proverbial frog in the well. Good afternoon, everyone. Suppose there are some members of the faculty here, proud parents, guests, and students. I'm delighted and honored, as I said, to be here at this festival that promote free-flowing dialogues and debates. It is always so refreshing to be with the young people and get a new perspective on life and times. That the festival held in Mumbai, a city that I love dearly, only adds to that delight. It is here that I lived and worked for 20-odd years and raised 3 children. But the main reason why I'm here, because the word Malhar, I find it's very evocative and I just absolutely love that name. And when I heard the word in context of your festival, it really brought back many memories. I remember 50 years back when I was in Gopalpur, I was working in a Bengali film directed by Kapil Sinha. It was called Joshoi Gute. And one day it was just pouring with rain and the wind was strong. My co-star Ruby Ghosh and I decided to walk to the deserted beach and experience Bay of Bengal in all its vibrancy. We took a transistor along. Huge waves were crashing down on the wet sand. We switched on our radio and suddenly there was Ustad Fayaz Khan's majestic voice singing Malhar in all its glory, challenging, transcending, blending with the roar of the rain-lashed sea. It was simply sublime. Perfect confluence of man and nature, best jugalbandi I've ever heard. Monsoon is my favorite time of the year. I know the waterlogged roads and traffic jams can be a nightmare, but rains bring out the quintessential Machil Chhol and Bodoline Bengali in me. I want to stay curled up on a divan all day with Halmudi and a volume of Tagore's poetry. And now, for the theme of your festival, confluence. What does it mean? How can we understand this idea? In a literal sense, it denotes the point where 2 rivers meet to become 1 river. And sometimes they can also go on in their separate ways. In the metaphorically speaking, in the other sense, it implies a melting pot of different ideas, different factors, of cultures and identities in a society. In my opinion, it is the richness and diversity of confluence that make India the fascinating country that it is. I'm happy that we are here exploring and celebrating that idea. My basic understanding of Indian history tells me that India's openness to the world saved it from stagnation and isolation. Mutual give and take between ancient India and Greece, Rome, Iran, China, and Central Asia enriched each other's cultural, artistic, and architectural heritage. From the Buddhist murals in Ajanta to various schools of Rajput and Mughal paintings, from the Hindu temple complexes of Khajuraho in the north and Madurai in the south, to great Islamic mosques, mausoleums, and palace complexes, including the Taj Mahal, epitomize the matchless architectural achievement. From Ramayana and Mahabharata to Sufi poetry, as well as the vast body of contemporary literature written in the country's innumerable languages and dialects, and now even in English, remains unparalleled. The simultaneous coexistence of the living classical tradition of Hindustani and Carnatic music and a range of folk traditions and popular cinema songs make up the vibrant music scene of the country. To go forward, obviously, we must embrace new ideas. But without an informed appreciation of our heritage, we would exist in a vacuum, where values and a sense of belonging are completely absent. Our memory of the past is our touchstone. How we protect it and how we preserve it will define what our culture is today and not merely what it was. I feel fortunate that my life so far has been an affirmation of this pluralism. And that is primarily because of certain influences that I have been privileged to experience. Growing up in a Tagore household, being mentored by Shotujit Rai, my marriage to Tiger, and being a part of the world's largest film industry, which for better or worse, we have come to call Bollywood. Let me begin with my name. Sharmila is not purely an Indian name. It was coined by Tagore after his visit to Czechoslovakia. There, Yormila became our Sharmila. My early memory is of a rambling house full of aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. This was the early 50s. There was no TV, nor Wi-Fi, and yet I had no idea of loneliness or boredom. The house was a compendium of pranks, poetry and politics, music, literature and ideas. Not having any designated space of our own or even possessions, we children had to share. We had no choice but to adapt and improvise, to be patient and tolerant. My grandfather played the piano and ate with knife and fork. He wore the jubba, a Middle Eastern attire popularized by Tagore. He was every bit a Western, Oriental zamindar. My grandmother, on the contrary, had no formal education, only spoke Bengali, but had no problem communicating with my non-Bengali friends. She didn't eat meat or beef, but happily cooked it for her husband. She was a traditional Bengali woman, yet she was accepting of new and even radical ideas, like my working in films and me marrying a Muslim gentleman. Her handwritten recipes are among my most precious possessions. Our grandmothers told us amazing stories from her time about the socio-cultural journey of the late 19th and early 20th century in Bengal. This was the time when Western education inspired on the one hand new reformism, new reformist ideas, and on the other a critique of traditional orthodoxies and belief systems. And how this in turn led to a renewed attachment to inherited values. This ferment of ideas left an indelible mark on the illustrious Tagore family. From our grandmother we learned about the Tagore men and women who played a dominant role in the Bengal Renaissance and were agents of social change, which had an enduring influence on life and people of Bengal. She told us about my great-grandfather, Rabindranath Tagore, her father-in-law, who was influenced by the Japanese art and introduced Cubism to India. But Rabindranath Tagore, of course, stood the tallest amongst them. Yeats described Tagore as a product of a whole people, a whole civilization. Tagore once described himself as a confluence of three cultures: Hindu, Muslim, and British. This had a profound impact on his worldview and the extensive body of work that he left behind. He named the university he founded Vishwa Bharati, a world university. This was before the private universities popularized the idea. The key theme of the World University was the interdependence of East and West. I'm sure many of you are aware of his stellar contribution to education, but even here, his vision was not limited to just academic knowledge. He said, the highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. He took his cue from nature amidst the wildly contrasting moods of the season. Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, and Tennyson were strong influences on his work. Tagore used Indian classical music as well as folk music of Bhattiyali and Gaul tradition in his songs, but was also inspired by the organ music of church hymns and the haunting melodies of the Scottish Highland. Here let us trace the journey of just one Scottish verse, Ye Banks and Braes of Bonnie Doon. Tagore translated this poem and set it to the tune of another Scottish song, the Caledonian Hunt's Delight. The outcome, Kule Kule, Dole Dole, Bohe Kiva, Mridu Bai. This found its way to the heart and lips of almost all Bengalis. Then, decades later, Pradeep Sarkar pictured the same song in Parinita on Vidya Balan, I think she's part of your alumni, and said, now it was in Hindi. Phool phool hamra dole, man mein kujhe de yaar, baag mein papiha bole, pihu, you kaha, kamona. I wish I could have sung this to you, but you can't have everything because my voice actually sounds like puddles really. I tried to sing it, but then I was advised, don't try that. But do you think Tagore had to worry about intellectual property rights? Perhaps not. Unlike many, Tagore never viewed India's heterogeneous culture as fragile and in need for protection from other influences. His nationalism espoused the new cosmopolitanism that welcomed various traditions. His vision of India was a peak, a Bharat peak, a confluence of all cultures where each can seamlessly coexist with the other in mutual harmony. His doors were always open to the best that the world had to offer, and I sincerely wish one of these days his dream will come true. If Tagore's work raised the question of Bengali existence in the colonial period, Rai's films attempted to find out what it meant in the time of independent India. Satyajit Ray built a bridge between his beloved Bengal and the rest of the world, and I have often stood on that bridge. He pioneered a complete new way of filmmaking that compelled the world to accept his cinema as an art form. For all our claims of going global with our cinema, with Indian cinema, it is still Rai who remains the most immortalized in world cinema's Hall of Fame. This is because his films were deeply embedded in their own cultures while holding an enthusiastic conversation with world cinema. This ability to speak eloquently to both the home and at home and the world is at the heart of his legacy. Despite his films being culture specific, they still managed to transcend language and cultural barriers. Probably that is why even today they run to packed houses in places like Los Angeles, Paris, Toronto, Hamburg, and other places. The style of irony, subtle witticism, understatement, humor, open endings, the use of layered motifs, and fluid camera works corroborate his Western sensitivity. Rai was deeply influenced by Western classical music and structured his films like a symphony. He says he thought endlessly of Mozart while he was filming Charulata, the Lonely Wife. He was impressed with Italian neorealistic directors, they made a deep impression on him, and he also claimed that he had learned his craft from Hollywood. And also he was hugely influenced and he admired Kurosawa, John Ford, Frank Capra, Renoir, to name a few. He was an intellectual genius, and it was impossible not to be moved by his inclusive worldview. What a privilege it has been to know him professionally and personally. From Bengal and Rai's films, I moved to mainstream commercial cinema in Bombay, which was what the city was called then, marked yet another phase in my life. While shooting, I had the chance to travel across the length and breadth of the country, from Kerala to Kashmir, Arunachal to Gujarat. This was before foreign shooting became the flavor of the time, because in our time we were still shooting in India. This gave me an opportunity to experience the diversity of clothes, cuisine, craft, culture, language, music, architecture, and folklore of India. It was educative and exhilarating. But at the same time, I continued to work in Bengali films. This exposed me to a different world of acting. Being an insider in two different industries within the same country allowed me to understand Indian cinema and indeed India from a very unique vantage point. For a lot of people here who have grown up on a diet of Hindi cinema, it might surprise you to know that at one time it was rather looked down upon and dismissed as a cliche-ridden and simplistic. And yet, for a nation recovering from a painful partition and hard-fought independence, and often threatening to come asunder on religious and caste lines, the importance of the worldview that Hindi cinema propagated cannot be ignored. The articulation of brotherhood between religions, the possibility of the coexistence of people belonging to disparate belief systems, these were the important tropes the filmmakers of my time used when I was part of that world. Yes, the message was conveyed in a very simplistic manner, but then our cinema, like our people, was evolving. In many ways, Hindi cinema was what united the country's many diverse regions and groups. It was an aradhana that could celebrate 100 weeks in Chennai, even though people in the region were agitating against Hindi. I remember an interaction with people of Indian origin in South Africa, whose passports did not allow them to enter India during the apartheid regime. They shared with me how every Sunday they dressed in their finest clothes and went to see my popular Soviet dance movies. This, they said, was their only link to India, and how I, through my films, had brought them closer. All came to Mumbai with their unique talent, their individuality, but most importantly, their idea of India, their dream to craft the history of our beloved industry. I feel immensely proud to be part of this majestic tapestry. My marriage to Tiger raised quite a few eyebrows. Marriage and career were not thought to be compatible, not then, nor now. To make matters more complicated, my husband was a Muslim and I was a Hindu. An actress at the peak of her career getting married was considered professional harakiri. But my life was never circumscribed by the trappings of stardom. I am an immensely private person, and despite the publicness of my persona, I never liked the intrusion into my privacy and consequently did not like the limelight to be constantly on me. My work was central to my existence, but I always knew a world beyond the studios. I didn't want to give up work, but I also wanted a family, like the family I grew up in. I was not one, it was not one or the other, I wanted both. Tiger understood and was supportive. Our marriage stood us in good stead for over 40 wonderful years and represented an intermingling of two different cultures, faiths, and lifestyles. Society saw our differences, but not what we had in common. I was fortunate to have a partner who shared my worldview, and together we shattered quite a few social myths. My life has had so many twists and turns. Growing up in a Bengali household, all I wanted was to go to Shantiniketan and become a painter like my ancestors. But Rai changed that, introduced me to the magical world of cinema at the age of 13, and there was no turning back. But while Aparna, the character I play in the film, became a heartthrob in Bengal, my school principal thought I would be a bad influence on other girls and asked me to leave school. So again, I had to make changes to adjust from a Bengali medium school to an English medium convent, Loreto, which of course introduced another chapter to my life. I became a professional actor after school, but I didn't want to give up my college education. But like a replay, my college principal decided I should either study or act in films. I can't do both when I was prepared to do both. Once again, films and education collided and I became a college dropout. My life took another turn. However, I didn't give up the pursuit of learning. I made the world into my university. Here I discovered teachers and mentors in the most unlikely places. Whilst a lot of them were indeed people, they also came in the form of cinema, books, painting, nature, and a diversity of social and cultural traditions. The wonderful thing about education and learning is that if you reach out to it, it is prepared to meet you halfway. I firmly believe education and awareness is what helps one to stay young and relevant. My exposure to cricket and the world of sports was so much fun. My inclusion into the Patodi household broadened my horizon. Then there was, of course, the learning at CBFC and UNICEF. Even at 70, my life is a work in progress. There is so much more to see and enjoy. Becoming a grandmother again very soon is not the least among them. I'm sure all of you are also product of many influences and many experiences. In conclusion, here are some final thoughts on the idea of confluence. India is vast. It is also ancient and wise. Over centuries, it has seen and learned a lot, rejected and absorbed. India's political and cultural mosaic, with its staggering diversity, is a matter of envy for contemporary societies. This interdependence goes deep in our collective memory. To keep it so, to keep it interdependent, is an economic, political, and social necessity. Things are rarely, if ever, just black and white. There are many shades of hues in between. This middle ground, these muted shades and tones, the core side of the confluence, if you please, is a vital part of India and our lives. The India we have known, loved, and cherished. I, for one, would not want that destroyed. The Constitution of India is a perfect example of the confluence of ideas and culture. 65 years after our Constitution became the law of the land, we need to ask ourselves, are we living its intent and promises, or are we failing it as a society? Are we moving towards cultural assimilation or cultural apartheid? Will the voices opposing the syncretism and cultural plurality gain strength or diminish? Are we moving towards acceptance or rejection? Here I am reminded, these are of course complex questions and there are no simple answers. Here I am reminded of what the Mexican poet and diplomat Octavio Paz said. What sets worlds in motion is the interplay of differences, their attractions and their repulsions. Life is plurality, death is uniformity. By suppressing differences and peculiarities, by eliminating different civilization and cultures, progress weakens life and favors death. The idea of a single civilization for everyone, implicit in the cult of progress and technique, impoverishes and mutilates us. Every view of the world that becomes extinct, every culture that disappears, diminishes a possibility of life. It is up to you, the future of India, to ensure that Paz's eloquent warning does not come to pass, that we continue to be a civilization that represents the coming together, the confluence of many disparate civilizations. Because your festival is named after a Ra, and given the theme for this year's festival, confluence, it is only appropriate that I end with a line from that wonderful song. Again, I can't sing it, I wish I could. Mile sur mera tumhara, mile sur mera tumhara, to sur bane hamara. It is up to you, it's up to all of us to ensure that the melodies we create includes the voices of every one of us. I'm glad we shared these thoughts on the eve of our Independence Day. Enjoy the rest of the festival, and I wish Malhar and Padmas all the very best.
Please.